Welcome to our channel. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear your thoughts and keep the conversation going. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. Avery Simpson's world ran on precision. Her alarms sang at 5:47 each morning, not 5:45, not 6 o'clock, but 5:47, because she had calculated that 17 minutes was the exact time required to move from sleep to full lucidity without the groggy fog that plagued lesser schedules. By 6:15 she was in the shower. By 6:45, dressed in one of her tailored sheath dresses, with her dark skin buffed to a subtle sheen and her natural curls pinned into a chignon so severe it could cut glass. By 7:30 she was seated at her desk on the 47th floor of McGrath Tower, 3 steps ahead of every demand Gerald McGrath hadn't yet made. She had been his executive secretary for 4 years. 4 years of learning that the billionaire CEO did not tolerate surprises, lateness or inefficiency. 4 years of memorizing his coffee order, black Ethiopian Yirgacheffe, exactly 160 degrees, his travel preferences and the precise narrowing of his eyes that meant someone was about to be fired. Avery had never seen that narrowing directed at her. She intended to keep it that way. "Good morning, Mr. McGrath," she said as the glass elevator whispered open at 7:48. 2 minutes early. She rose from her desk, tablet in hand. "Your 8 o'clock with Tanaka Industries is confirmed. I've flagged the revised merger clauses on page 14. Your 9:30 rescheduled to 10 o'clock to accommodate the Zurich call. And your wife called, she reminded you about the gala on Saturday and said, and I quote, 'Do not send Avery to pick out my dress again, she has terrible taste in champagne sequins.'" Gerald McGrath, a man who had built a commercial real estate empire from a single condemned warehouse, allowed himself something close to a smile. "She doesn't appreciate your efficiency." "No one ever does, sir." He disappeared into his corner office and Avery returned to her workstation, fingers flying across the keyboard. The 47th floor hummed around her, the soft chime of incoming messages, the distant murmur of the executive boardroom, the whisper of the climate control system she'd reprogrammed herself after the summer of 22, when the building's HVAC had nearly caused an international incident with the Japanese delegation. This was her kingdom. Her perfectly ordered, predictable, professional kingdom. So when her phone buzzed at 6:47 that evening with a text from Emily Chin, "You're coming with me tonight." "I'm not asking," Avery felt the first crack in her carefully maintained facade. "I can't," she typed back. "Reports to finalize. Tokyo opens in 6 hours. Emily's response was immediate. "You've worked 14-hour days for 2 weeks straight. You canceled on me 3 times. I haven't seen you smile since February. Put on something that isn't sheath and meet me at the Rookery at 9. Avery stared at the screen. The Rookery. A downtown club she'd read about in the society pages, all exposed brick, craft cocktails, and the kind of beautiful, reckless people who didn't have quarterly reports due. She should say no. She had rules. Rule number 4. Never go out on a weeknight. Rule number 7. Never drink more than 1 glass of wine in public. Rule number 12. Never let anyone see her with her guard down. But Emily was right about one thing. She couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled. At 8:57, Avery stood outside the Rookery in a deep burgundy dress she'd forgotten she owned, a relic from a brief, ill-fated attempt at dating 2 years ago. The fabric clung to her curves in ways her sheath dresses never did. Her hair was down, falling in loose coils past her shoulders. She felt naked. She felt exposed. She felt, for the first time in months, like a woman instead of an extension of Gerald McGrath's calendar. There she is. Emily emerged from the velvet rope, all glossy blonde bob and feline grin. "I was starting to think you'd been assimilated into McGrath's cybernetic mainframe. Don't give him ideas." Emily grabbed her hand and pulled her inside. The club was everything Avery feared and nothing she'd expected. A throbbing bass line she could feel in her ribs, amber lighting that turned everyone gold, the electric friction of bodies moving in close quarters. She followed Emily to a booth near the back, accepting a cocktail she didn't order and wouldn't have chosen, a pink concoction in a coupe glass that tasted like grapefruit and danger. "Drink," Emily commanded. "Dance. Flirt with someone inappropriate. I want you to be a disaster tonight." I don't do disasters. That's exactly why you need one. Avery took a sip. Then another. The music shifted, something slow and pulsing, and she let her shoulders drop an inch. Then another inch. The knot between her shoulder blades, the one that had taken up permanent residence during the Tanaka negotiations, began, impossibly, to loosen. She wasn't meeting anyone tonight, she told herself. She wasn't dancing. She certainly wasn't flirting. But for the first time in 4 years, sitting in a dimly lit club with her best friend and a drink she hadn't vetted, Avery Simpson allowed herself to imagine what it might feel like to break every single one of her rules. She didn't know that across the city, on a plane descending through the clouds toward the private airstrip outside Manhattan, a man with his father's sharp jaw and his own dangerous smile was preparing to dismantle her entire world. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, she ordered a second pink drink and laughed at something Emily said, and the sound surprised her so much she almost dropped her glass. The second drink went down easier than the first. By the time Avery finished it, the bass had migrated from her ribs to her bloodstream, and the amber lighting had softened every sharp edge in the room. She was laughing, actually laughing, at Emily's play-by-play of a disastrous hinge date involving a man who had brought his mother's lasagna to a wine bar and cried when she didn't finish it. He said, "My nana rolled over in her grave," Emily gasped, wiping her eyes. I said, "Sir, I'm allergic to gluten and emotional manipulation." Avery pressed a hand to her chest, trying to contain the giggles bubbling up. This was dangerous. This was completely outside her protocols. She hadn't laughed like this since, when? College? Before she'd learned that laughter was inefficient, that joy was a distraction, that the only way to survive in Gerald McGrath's orbit was to become as unassailable as granite. "I need air," she said, sliding out of the booth. The club had grown warmer, more crowded, bodies pressing together on the dance floor like a single breathing organism. "Don't disappear on me," Emily called after her. "I'll be 5 minutes." The back terrace was a revelation, a narrow strip of wrought iron and twinkling fairy lights overlooking the downtown skyline. The October air hit her skin like a cool balm, and Avery exhaled, leaning against the railing. Below, the city sprawled in a carpet of gold and silver, indifferent to the woman on the balcony who had forgotten, for one evening, to be perfect. She didn't hear him approach. "You look like someone who's trying to solve a very complicated math problem." The voice was low, warm, with a hint of something she couldn't place. Amusement, maybe, or curiosity. Avery turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, hands in his pockets, head tilted like she was the most interesting thing he'd seen all night. Tall. Broad shoulders under a charcoal blazer worn without a tie, the top 2 buttons of his white shirt undone. Dark hair, slightly disheveled as if he'd been running his fingers through it. And his face, God, his face, was the kind of handsome that made her forget to breathe. Strong jaw, full lips curved in a lazy smile, and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. Her first instinct was to straighten her spine, smooth her expression into something professional and unreadable. But she wasn't at work. She wasn't Avery Simpson, executive secretary. She was just a woman in a burgundy dress with her hair down and 2 pink drinks in her bloodstream. "That's oddly specific," she said. He pushed off from the doorframe and walked toward her, unhurried, like he had all the time in the world. "Am I wrong?" Avery considered lying. Then she considered the fact that she didn't owe this stranger anything. Not her professionalism, not her caution, not the mask she wore like a second skin. "It's not a math problem," she said. "It's a question of whether I'm allowed to enjoy myself without the universe taking notes for future blackmail." He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something woodsy with a hint of fruit. "And what did the universe decide? The jury's still out." His smile widened and something shifted in his eyes. Interest. Genuine interest, not the practiced charm she'd seen from the men who drifted through McGrath Tower's executive floors. "I'm Andrew," he said, extending a hand. "No last name. No title. Just Andrew." She took his hand. His palm was warm, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Avery." "Avery," he repeated like he was tasting the syllables. "That's a name that means something. Ruler of the elves, isn't it? Or council at the crossroads." She blinked. "Most people just say it's old-fashioned. Most people are boring." He released her hand but didn't step back. "What do you do, Avery, who might not be allowed to enjoy herself?" The question should have been simple. But the truth, I'm the secretary to one of the most powerful men in the city, and I haven't had a genuine conversation in 4 years. Felt like too much and not enough. I manage chaos, she said instead. For a living. I make order out of mess so other people don't have to think about it. Andrew's eyebrows rose. That sounds like a superpower. It sounds like a job description. Same thing if you're good at it. He leaned against the railing beside her, close enough that his sleeve brushed her bare arm. A current ran through her, quick and electric. Are you good at it, Avery? She met his eyes. I'm the best. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and unguarded, and Avery felt something crack open in her chest. Something she'd sealed away years ago, behind spreadsheets and schedules and the relentless machinery of being indispensable. They talked for an hour. Then 2. He asked questions that had nothing to do with surface things. Not where she worked or what she earned, but what she thought about when she couldn't sleep, whether she believed in coincidences, what book had made her cry last. She found herself answering honestly, the words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She told him about her mother's hands, how they'd looked after a lifetime of cleaning other people's houses. She told him about the scholarship that had saved her, the fear that still woke her some nights, that she was one mistake away from losing everything she'd built. Andrew listened. Not the way people listen while waiting for their turn to speak, but the way you listen to music you didn't know you needed. When she finally stopped talking, breathless and slightly horrified at her own vulnerability, he was watching her with an expression she couldn't name. You're extraordinary, he said simply. Avery shook her head. You don't know me. I know enough. He reached out, brushing a curl from her forehead with fingers that trembled slightly, the first sign that he wasn't as composed as he seemed. I know you're funny and brilliant and you care so much about doing things right that you've forgotten you're allowed to be human. I know you laugh like you're surprised by the sound. And I know, he said, his voice dropping, that I haven't been able to look away from you since you walked onto this balcony. The world contracted to the space between them. The city fell silent. The music faded. There was only Andrew and the question in his eyes, and the terrifying, exhilarating realization that Avery Simpson was about to break her own rules. She leaned in first. His lips met hers like an answer to a question she hadn't known she was asking. Soft, then deeper, his hands sliding to the small of her back, pulling her closer. She melted into him, into the warmth of his chest, the steady beat of his heart against her own racing pulse. The kiss tasted like whiskey and want and the first good decision she'd made in years. When they finally broke apart, foreheads pressed together, Andrew smiled. I was hoping you'd do that. Avery laughed, breathless. Don't get used to it. But even as she said it, she knew, this night would live inside her forever. A single, perfect crack in the armor. A reminder that somewhere beneath the efficient, composed, immaculate secretary was a woman who still wanted to be seen. She just didn't know that seeing her would cost everything. Avery arrived at McGrath Tower at 7:29 on Monday morning, which was 2 minutes later than usual and felt, somehow, like a moral failing. She had spent the entire weekend convincing herself that Saturday night meant nothing. A fleeting escape. A momentary lapse in judgment brought on by grapefruit cocktails and October air and a pair of whiskey-colored eyes that had no business being that warm. She had deleted the stranger's number. Andrew, she reminded herself, his name was Andrew, before she'd even left the club, slipping out at 1:47 a.m. while he was in the bathroom because she couldn't bear the weight of a proper goodbye. One night. One kiss. Nothing more. She straightened her charcoal pants, checked that every hair remained pinned in its proper place, and stepped off the elevator onto the 47th floor with her tablet in hand and her mask firmly in place. Good morning, Mr. McGrath, she said as Gerald emerged from his private elevator at 7:52. Your 8:30 with legal has been moved to the blue conference room. The Hong Kong reports are on your desk. And your son called, he said to expect him around 9. Avery's fingers paused over her keyboard. Gerald McGrath had 3 sons, all of whom she had met at various company functions. The eldest, William, was a carbon copy of his father, stern, humorless, already running the European division. The middle, James, was a former Olympic sailor who showed up to board meetings in linen shirts and spoke mostly in nautical metaphors. But the youngest, the new executive vice president, Gerald said, not looking up from his phone. Andrew's been in London for the past 3 years. He's ready to take on more responsibility here. I expect you to extend him the same professionalism you extend to me. Of course, sir. She had never met Andrew McGrath. He'd been abroad since before she was hired, a ghost in the family lore, mentioned only in passing. Andrew sends his regards. Andrew won't be making the gala. Andrew is busy being a disappointment in another time zone. The knot between her shoulder blades, the one that had loosened on Saturday night, tightened again. At 8:57 the glass elevator chimed. Avery rose from her desk, professional smile at the ready, tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. She had done this 100 times. New executives, new clients, new faces, all she had to do was smile, nod, and direct them to the appropriate conference room. The elevator doors slid open, and the world stopped. He was taller than she remembered. Or maybe that was the suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, a pale blue tie that matched his eyes. His hair was still dark, still slightly disheveled, though she suspected he'd actually tried to tame it this morning. His jaw was sharper in the fluorescent light of the executive floor, his shoulders broader without the dim glow of fairy lights to soften them. But it was his eyes that undid her. Whiskey and sunlight. Warm, amused, and currently fixed on her face with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. Andrew McGrath stepped off the elevator and smiled. "Hello again," he said, and his voice was the same low, warm murmur that had murmured "you're extraordinary" against her lips less than 48 hours ago. "I was hoping I'd see you here." Avery's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. No. No, no, no. This was not happening. The universe could not be this cruel. She had spent 4 years building a fortress of professionalism, had sacrificed friendships and relationships and the simple pleasure of laughing in public, all to become untouchable. And now the man who had seen her with her guard down, who had held her on a balcony and kissed her like she was something precious, was standing in front of her wearing a McGrath Industries ID badge. "Mr. McGrath," she said, and was impressed by how steady her voice sounded, even as her hands trembled against her tablet. "Welcome to the New York office. I'm Avery Simpson, your father's executive secretary. If you'll follow me, I'll show you to your temporary office while we finalize the permanent arrangements." She stepped back, gesturing toward the hallway, putting as much distance between them as professionalism would allow. Andrew didn't move. "Avery." He said her name the same way he had on the balcony, like it meant something. "About Saturday." "Saturday," she interrupted, her voice dropping to a sharp whisper. "I was off the clock. What happens off the clock is irrelevant to my position here. I am your father's employee. You are a senior executive. That is the beginning and end of our relationship." Something flickered across his face. Hurt maybe. Or disappointment. But underneath it, stubbornly, infuriatingly, that same spark of interest she'd seen on the terrace. "Is that what you want?" he asked quietly. "It's what I need." She turned and walked down the hallway, her heels clicking against the marble floor in sharp, staccato beats. She could feel him behind her, following, his presence a warmth at her back that she refused to acknowledge. The temporary office was a glass-walled corner space with a view of the East River. Avery stopped at the threshold, pointing inside. "Your father requested you review the Q3 reports before the 11 o'clock meeting. They're on the desk. If you need anything, my extension is 471. Please use it only for business." She turned to leave. "Avery." She stopped. Didn't turn around. "I haven't stopped thinking about you," Andrew said quietly. Not for 1 minute. For a single, treacherous second, she let herself imagine it. Let herself imagine turning around, crossing the distance between them, picking up where they'd left off on that balcony. Let herself imagine what it would feel like to be reckless just once, just for him. Then she remembered rule number 1. Never mix business with pleasure. Never. Ever. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said and walked away. But as she settled back behind her desk, fingers trembling over her keyboard, Avery knew she was lying. To him. To herself. To the growing, terrifying part of her heart that had already started counting down to the next time she would see his face. Avery spent Tuesday morning building a wall. Not a literal one, though she briefly considered the merits of constructing a physical barrier between her desk and the glass-walled corner office where Andrew McGrath had spent the previous day watching her like she was the only person on the 47th floor. No, this wall was made of schedules and protocols and the kind of brisk professionalism that had made her indispensable to Gerald McGrath for 4 years. She would be polite. She would be helpful. She would be utterly, impenetrably neutral. And she would absolutely not think about the way Andrew had said her name. At 8:15 her phone buzzed. Internal extension. Andrews. She stared at the blinking light for 3 full seconds before picking up. Avery Simpson. Good morning. His voice was warm even through the tinny office speaker. I need the Hardwick file. Father mentioned you'd have it. The Hardwick file. She had compiled it herself, 73 pages of due diligence on a potential acquisition. It was sitting in the third drawer of her filing cabinet, exactly where it should be. I'll have it sent up within the hour. I'd prefer to pick it up myself. Stretch my legs. Avery closed her eyes. That won't be necessary, Mr. McGrath. I'll have an assistant deliver it. I'm not above using the internal messenger service, Avery. I just prefer human interaction. You're human enough, she thought, and immediately hated herself for thinking it. Suit yourself. She hung up before he could respond. He appeared at her desk 17 minutes later, which gave her just enough time to smooth her expression into something professionally blank. He was wearing a different suit today, gray with a pocket square she suspected his mother had chosen, and he was holding 2 cups of coffee. One is for you, he said, setting a ceramic mug on the corner of her desk. Ethiopian Yirgachev. 160 degrees. You take it black. Avery's blood went cold. How do you know how I take my coffee? I asked. He said it simply, like it was the most natural thing in the world. The kitchen staff speak very highly of you, by the way. Apparently you're the only executive who remembers their names. She should refuse the coffee. She should slide it back across the desk and tell him that fraternization was against her personal code of conduct. Instead, she wrapped her fingers around the warm ceramic and tried not to notice how perfectly it fit her palms. The Hardwick file, she said, extending a manila folder. Tab 17 contains the financial projections you'll need. Tab 22 has the risk assessment. Andrew took the folder but didn't open it. He was watching her again, that same unhurried gaze she remembered from the balcony, like he had all the time in the world to figure her out. Thank you, Avery. Miss Simpson, she corrected. In the office, I'm Miss Simpson. Something flickered across his face. Amusement, maybe, or admiration. Miss Simpson, then. Thank you for your efficiency. He left. The coffee stayed. She drank it. Every last drop. By Wednesday, Andrew had found 3 more excuses to visit her desk. The first was a question about the parking garage assignments, which could have been answered by a single email. The second was a request for his father's travel itinerary, which was already available on the shared drive. The third was a delivery of fresh flowers, white peonies, her favorite, which she had never told him. How did you know? She asked, staring at the arrangement like it might explode. I asked, he said again. Your assistant, Janet. She mentioned you keep a picture of peonies on your phone lock screen. Avery made a mental note to have a very serious conversation with Janet about workplace boundaries. Then she made another mental note about the way Andrew's smile crinkled the corners of his eyes, and how that crinkle had no business being that endearing. The flowers are inappropriate, she said. The flowers are a thank you. For the Hardwick file. He leaned against the edge of her desk, close enough that she could smell his cologne, the same woodsy citrus from the club. Is there a rule against gratitude, Miss Simpson? There's a rule against fraternization. I'm not asking you to fraternize. I'm asking you to accept a gift from a colleague who appreciates your work. My work doesn't require appreciation. It requires results. Andrew tilted his head, studying her. Who hurt you, Avery? Who taught you that you had to earn kindness? The question landed like a punch to the sternum. She thought of her mother's hands, cracked and bleeding from scrubbing floors. She thought of the scholarship interview where she'd been asked if she really thought someone like her belonged at a university like that. She thought of every man who had ever looked at her dark skin and seen a servant, not a colleague. No one, she said too quickly. I'm simply professional. Andrew didn't push. He just nodded, picked up his coffee cup and walked back to his office. But at the doorway he paused. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I don't see a secretary when I look at you. I see a woman who built herself from nothing and refuses to apologize for it. That's not professional. That's extraordinary. He left before she could respond. Avery sat at her desk for a long time after that, staring at the peonies, feeling the wall she'd built begin to crack. Thursday was worse. Thursday, Andrew McGrath joined the executive team meeting, which meant he sat directly across from her father's seat, directly across from where Avery stood at attention, tablet ready, taking minutes. He didn't stare at her. He didn't smile at her. He simply existed in her peripheral vision, warm and solid and infuriatingly present, while she tried to focus on quarterly earnings and market projections. But when the meeting ended and the other executives filed out, Andrew lingered. "You're very good at that," he said, nodding toward her tablet. "The minutes? You catch every detail. It's my job." Most people in your position would have missed the subtext in Tanaka's objection. "You didn't? You flagged it without being asked." Avery tucked her tablet against her chest. "Is there something you need, Mr. McGrath?" He stepped closer. Not close enough to be inappropriate, but close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to meet his eyes. Close enough that she could see the small scar on his jaw, the flecks of gold in his irises. "I need you to stop pretending you don't feel this," he said quietly. "I need you to admit that Saturday night meant something. Because it meant everything to me." Avery's heart hammered against her ribs. She thought of her rules, her walls, the life she had built with blood and sacrifice. She thought of her mother's voice in her ear. "Don't let them take anything you didn't offer, baby. Not your time, not your tears, not your heart." "I can't," she whispered. "Why not?" "Because you're a McGrath." She stepped back, putting distance between them. "And I'm just the secretary. That's all I'll ever be to people like you." She walked out of the conference room before he could answer, before he could see the tears burning behind her eyes. But even as she retreated to the sanctuary of her desk, she knew the truth. The wall was crumbling. And Andrew McGrath was standing on the other side, waiting to catch every falling stone. By the second week, the stolen moments had become a language of their own. Avery learned to read the patterns. The way Andrew would linger by the water cooler at 10:17, when she always refilled her bottle. The way he would send internal messages with questions he already knew the answers to, just to see her name appear in his chat window. The way his gaze would find hers across the executive conference table during interminable board meetings, quick and electric, there and gone before anyone else could notice. She told herself she was being careful. Professional. She told herself that the flutter in her chest every time he smiled was simply indigestion, a lingering side effect of the grapefruit cocktails from that night she refused to think about. She was lying. It happened in increments so small she almost didn't notice the shift. A brush of his hand against hers when she passed him a file. The way he said her name, Avery, not Miss Simpson, never again after that first week, like it was a secret they shared. The coffee he continued to bring her every morning, Ethiopian Yirgacheffe, 160 degrees, black, placed on the corner of her desk with a small nod that needed no words. "You're playing with fire," Emily said over drinks on Friday night. They were at a quiet wine bar this time, no dancing, no strangers, just two friends in a corner booth while Avery picked at a charcuterie board she had no appetite for. "I can see it in your eyes. You're already in too deep." "I'm not in anything," Avery said, but the words tasted false. "We work together. That's all." Emily gave her a look that said, "I've known you since freshman orientation, don't insult me. You canceled plans with me twice this week to stay late at the office. You who has never worked a minute of overtime that wasn't strictly necessary. When I asked why, you said, and I quote, 'There are reports that need reviewing.' There were reports. Bullshit. You were staying late because he was staying late." Avery set down her wine glass. The truth sat heavy on her tongue, unwelcome and undeniable. "Nothing has happened," she said quietly. "Nothing physical. We've barely even talked, not really. But Emily..." She paused, searching for words that didn't exist. "When I'm near him, I forget why I'm supposed to stay away. It's like every rule I've ever made just dissolves." Emily reached across the table and took her hand. "That's called chemistry, babe. It's supposed to feel like that. The question is whether it's worth the risk." Avery thought about the risk. She thought about Gerald McGrath's face if he ever found out, the disappointment, the betrayal. She thought about the whispers that would follow, the assumptions. She slept her way to the top. Of course she did. Look at her. She thought about everything she had sacrificed, every late night, every canceled dinner, every relationship she had let wither on the vine because she couldn't afford to be distracted. She thought about her mother, who had cleaned offices just like the ones in McGrath Tower, who had come home with bruised knees and a tired smile and told her daughter to reach higher. Higher, not farther. Not into the arms of the boss's son. "It's not worth it," Avery said. "It can't be." But even as she said it, she knew she was lying. The following Tuesday, Andrew found her in the archive room. It was the only place on the 47th floor without glass walls, a narrow corridor of filing cabinets and forgotten annual reports where the air smelled like old paper and dust. Avery had retreated there after a particularly brutal meeting with Gerald, who had dressed her down for a scheduling conflict that wasn't her fault. A conflict caused, ironically, by Andrew's last-minute addition to the board calendar. She was leaning against the far wall, eyes closed, breathing through the humiliation, when she heard the door click shut behind her. "Janet said you were in here," Andrew said softly. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Avery opened her eyes. He was standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression stripped of its usual easy charm. He looked worried. Genuinely, achingly worried. "I'm fine," she said. "Your father was right to be upset. I should have caught the conflict before the meeting. My father was an ass." Andrew stepped closer. "The conflict was my fault. I told you to add the Tokyo call after the schedule had already gone out. You were covering for me and he blamed you for it. It's my job to manage his expectations. It's not your job to be his punching bag." Avery shook her head, a hollow laugh escaping her throat. "You don't understand. I've spent 4 years making sure he never has a reason to doubt me. One mistake, one real mistake, and everything I've built disappears. That's how it works for people like me." Andrew's brow furrowed. "People like you? People who don't have trust funds. People who don't have family names that open doors. People who have to be twice as good to get half as far." Her voice cracked and she hated herself for it. "You showed up here 3 weeks ago and they gave you an executive vice presidency. I've been here 4 years and I'm still the secretary. Do you understand the difference?" The silence between them was heavy, charged. Then Andrew closed the distance. He didn't kiss her. He didn't touch her. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, close enough that she had to tilt her chin up to hold his gaze. "I understand that you're the most capable person in this entire building," he said quietly. "I understand that my father would crumble without you. I understand that you've built something here that no one gave you, and that you have every right to protect it." He reached up, slowly giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers brushed a curl from her forehead, the same gesture from the balcony, and Avery felt her resolve splinter. "But I also understand," he continued, "that you feel this too. Whatever this is. And I'm not asking you to risk your career for me. I'm not asking you to do anything you're not ready for. I'm just asking you to stop pretending I don't exist." Avery's heart was a war drum in her chest. She thought of her rules, her walls, her mother's hands. She thought of every reason this was a terrible idea. Then she thought of nothing at all. "Andrew," she whispered. And for one perfect, terrible moment she let herself lean in. It started with a photograph. Avery didn't see it at first. She was too busy surviving, navigating Gerald's increasingly volatile mood, fielding questions about the Tokyo merger, pretending that the archive room had never happened. She and Andrew had not kissed. They had come close, close enough that she could still feel the ghost of his breath on her lips, but she had pulled back at the last second. "Not here," she had whispered. "Not like this." He had nodded, stepped away, and the moment had shattered. But someone had been watching. The photograph surfaced on Wednesday morning, posted to an anonymous industry gossip blog called The Water Cooler. It showed Andrew and Avery in the archive room, his hand near her face, her body angled toward his. The caption read, "McGrath Air gets cozy with Daddy's secretary. Guess the hiring process has changed at McGrath Industries." By noon it had been shared 200 times. Avery found out when Janet rushed to her desk, face pale, phone extended. "I'm so sorry," Janet whispered. "I didn't know who sent it. I didn't know anyone was watching." Avery took the phone. Stared at the image. The world tilted. "This isn't," she stopped. Swallowed. "We weren't, nothing happened." "I know," Janet said. "But they don't care what happened. They care what it looks like." What it looked like was exactly what Avery had feared most. The secretary and the boss's son. The cliché. The scandal. Everything she had worked for, reduced to a grainy photograph and a snide caption. Her phone began to ring. Then her desk line. Then her personal cell. She ignored all of it. Andrew found her on the terrace. Not the club terrace where this had begun, but the 47th floor terrace, a narrow balcony overlooking the city where executives went to take phone calls and pretend they were above the fray. Avery was standing at the railing, arms wrapped around herself, her chignon coming loose in the October wind. "I'm so sorry," Andrew said, stepping beside her. "I should have been more careful. I should never have followed you into that room." "Don't." Her voice was flat. "Empty. Don't apologize for something that was my fault. I knew the risks. I let my guard down anyway. This isn't your fault. This is someone with a camera and a grudge and too much time on their hands." Avery turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but she wasn't crying. She looked, instead, like someone who had already done all her grieving in private. "My mother called. She saw the post. She wanted to know if I was sleeping with my boss's son for a promotion." Andrew flinched. "That's not, Avery, no one who knows you would believe that. No one who knows me is the problem." She turned back to the railing. "It's everyone else. The board. The investors. Your father. They're not going to see a woman who made one mistake. They're going to see exactly what that caption said. And I'm going to spend the rest of my career proving them wrong." Andrew moved to stand beside her, close but not touching. "I'll talk to my father. I'll explain." "Explain what?" "That we've been sneaking around behind his back for weeks? That his executive vice president has been bringing coffee to his secretary like a lovesick teenager?" She laughed, bitter and broken. "There's no explanation that makes this better, Andrew. There's only damage control." The door behind them opened. Both of them turned. Gerald McGrath stood in the doorway, phone in hand, face unreadable. He looked from Andrew to Avery and back again, and Avery felt the ground open beneath her feet. "My office," Gerald said. "Both of you. Now." The walk to the office was the longest of Avery's life. She could feel the stares as she passed. The executive assistants, the junior VPs, the mailroom clerk who suddenly found a reason to be on the 47th floor. The whispers followed her like smoke. "Did you see the post? Can you believe it? I always thought she was too ambitious." Gerald closed the door behind them. He didn't sit. He stood behind his desk, arms crossed, the photograph displayed on his laptop screen like evidence at a trial. "How long?" he asked. Avery opened her mouth, but Andrew spoke first. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what is it?" Gerald's voice was cold, controlled, more dangerous than any outburst. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my son is fraternizing with my employee. An employee, I might add, who signed a strict non-fraternization agreement as a condition of her employment." Avery's blood ran cold. She had signed that agreement. 3 pages of legalese she had skimmed on her first day, too grateful for the job to read the fine print. Any romantic or personal relationship with a member of the McGrath family or C-suite executives must be disclosed immediately. Failure to do so constitutes grounds for termination. "I take full responsibility," Andrew said. "I pursued her. She told me to stop. She told me it was inappropriate. I didn't listen." Gerald's gaze shifted to Avery. "Is that true?" Avery's throat was sandpaper. She could lie. She could protect herself, throw Andrew under the bus, preserve her career at his expense. Would be easy. Might even work. But she looked at Andrew, at the way he stood between her and his father, shoulders squared, taking the blame, and she couldn't do it. "No," she said quietly. "It's not true. I knew what I was doing. I let it happen. I wanted it to happen." She lifted her chin, met Gerald's eyes. "I broke the rules, sir. I understand if that means you have to let me go." The silence that followed was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Gerald McGrath looked at his son. Then at his secretary. Then back at his son. "I'm not firing anyone," he said finally. "Yet." He picked up a pen, tapped it against his desk. "But this ends now. Whatever is or isn't happening between you, it stops. Andrew, you will have no further contact with Ms. Simpson outside of strictly necessary professional communication. Miss Simpson, you will continue your duties without distraction. And if I see another photograph, another rumor, another whisper about either of you, there will be consequences." He looked at Avery and his eyes softened just slightly. "You're the best secretary I've ever had," he said. "Don't make me regret keeping you." Avery nodded, unable to speak. Andrew opened his mouth, but Gerald cut him off. "Get out. Both of you." They walked out together, down the hallway, past the staring eyes and the whispering voices. At the elevator bank, Andrew stopped. Avery. Don't. She pressed the call button, willing the doors to open faster. Your father is right. This has to stop. And if I can't? His voice was raw. If I've already fallen too far to go back? The elevator arrived. Avery stepped inside, turned to face him and let him see, just for a moment, the truth she couldn't speak aloud. Then we both drown, she said. The doors closed between them. Avery spent 3 days being perfect. She arrived at 5:47. She dressed in charcoal and navy. She answered every call, flagged every document, anticipated Gerald McGrath's needs before he voiced them. She did not look at Andrew's office. She did not think about the terrace or the archive room or the way his voice sounded when he said her name. She became, once again, the immaculate machine she had trained herself to be. It worked insofar as anything worked. The whispers faded. The photographs slipped down the blog's front page, replaced by newer scandals, fresher gossip. Gerald stopped watching her with suspicion and returned to watching her with the quiet respect she had earned over 4 years. But at night, alone in her apartment, the machine shut down. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment. The balcony. The coffee. The archive room. Andrew's face as the elevator doors closed between them. If I've already fallen too far to go back? She had not answered him. She had been too afraid to answer him. On the third night, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. She almost deleted it. But something, some stubborn, hopeful part of her that refused to die, opened the message instead. It's Andrew. I know I shouldn't be texting you. I know your father would fire us both. But I need you to know that none of this has changed anything for me. I'm not going to stop fighting for you. Not unless you tell me to. So tell me, Avery. Tell me to walk away and I will. But if there's even a part of you that wants this, wants me, then meet me tomorrow. 7 p.m. The Rookery. Same balcony. Avery read the message 7 times. She did not respond. She went to work the next day like nothing had happened. She dressed in black, pinned her curls into a chignon so tight it gave her a headache, and buried herself in quarterly reports until her vision blurred. At 5 o'clock, Gerald dismissed her early. You look tired, Avery. Go home, and she nodded and gathered her things and walked to the elevator. Andrew was standing by the call button. He wasn't supposed to be there. He took the private elevator, the executive lift that opened directly into his father's suite. But here he was, in the common corridor, hands in his pockets, looking at her like she was the last light in a dark room. You didn't answer my text, he said quietly. I'm not supposed to contact you outside of work. That's not what I asked. The elevator arrived. The doors slid open. Neither of them moved. Avery looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in days. He looked different, softer somehow. The easy charm was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for 72 hours, waiting for her to say the words that would either save or drown him. Andrew, she said, and her voice cracked on his name. You have to understand what you're asking me to risk. My career. My reputation. Everything I've worked for since I was 18 years old. My mother cleaned offices in buildings like this one. She scrubbed toilets so I could have a desk. And you want me to throw that away for what? He stepped closer. Say it, Avery. What am I asking you to throw yourself away for? She closed her eyes. The words sat on her tongue, heavy and terrifying. For us, she whispered. For something that might not even last. For a man who could wake up tomorrow and decide I'm not worth the trouble. Andrew reached out. His fingers brushed her chin, tilting her face up until she had no choice but to meet his eyes. You're wrong, he said softly. About all of it. This isn't temporary for me. You're not a distraction or a fling or a scandal I'm trying to survive. You're the first real thing that's happened to me in years. He paused, swallowed. I love you, Avery. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. But I love you, and I'm not going to spend the rest of my life pretending I don't. The words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples through everything she thought she knew. You can't love me, she said. You don't even know me. I know you take your coffee at 160 degrees because you read a study about optimal caffeine extraction and decided efficiency applied to pleasure too. I know you call your mother every Sunday at 3 p.m., and you lie to her about how happy you are because you don't want her to worry. I know you pretend not to like peonies, but you've had the same dried bouquet on your kitchen table for 3 years because your grandmother gave them to you before she died. He took her hands, held them between his own. I know you, Avery. Maybe not everything, but enough to know I don't want to stop learning. The elevator doors tried to close. Andrew caught them with his elbow, held them open. Come with me tonight, he said. To the rookery. Not because I'm asking you to risk anything. Just because I want to see you smile the way you smiled on that balcony. The way you smile when you forget to be perfect. Avery thought about her rules. Her walls. Her mother's hands, her grandmother's peonies, the scholarship interview where she had promised herself she would never let anyone make her feel small again. She thought about Andrew's hands around hers, warm and steady, and the way he said her name like it was something precious. She thought about the leap. I can't promise anything, she said slowly. I can't promise I won't be scared, or that I won't run, or that I won't wake up tomorrow and convince myself this is a mistake. Andrew smiled, that same lazy, hopeful smile from the first night, the one that made her forget to breathe. I'm not asking for promises. I'm asking for a chance. Avery stepped into the elevator. Not away from him, toward him. She pressed the button for the lobby, and when the doors closed she was still holding his hands. 7 p.m., she said. The rookery. He kissed her then, soft and slow like they had all the time in the world. And for the first time in 4 years, Avery Simpson let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she did. That night, the balcony was quieter than she remembered. October had turned colder, and the fairy lights flickered against the darkening sky. Andrew was already there when she arrived, leaning against the railing in the same green blazer from earlier. He turned when he heard her footsteps, and his face broke into a smile that made her heart stutter. You came, he said. I almost didn't. But you came. Avery walked to the railing, stood beside him, looked out at the city below. The same city. The same lights. But everything felt different now, brighter, sharper, like she was seeing it for the first time. I'm still scared, she admitted. Me too. You're a billionaire's son. What do you have to be scared of? Andrew turned to face her, took her hand, pressed it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat, fast, unsteady, real. Losing you, he said. Before I ever really had you. Avery looked at their joined hands, her dark fingers intertwined with his, and thought about all the reasons this should terrify her. The rumors, the risks, the life she had built, brick by brick, that could still come crumbling down. But she thought about something else too. She thought about her mother's voice, not warning her away, but whispering something she had almost forgotten. Don't let fear make your choices for you, baby. You've spent your whole life being careful. Maybe it's time to be brave. She lifted her free hand, cupped Andrew's jaw, and kissed him. Not careful. Not professional. Not safe. Brave. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright and she was smiling. Really smiling, the kind of smile she had forgotten she owned. What happens now? He asked. Avery looked out at the city, then back at him. Now, she said, we figure it out. Together. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't a guarantee. It was just a beginning. 2 people on a balcony holding hands, choosing each other against all odds. And for Avery Simpson, who had spent her whole life playing it safe, that was enough. If this story touched your heart, remember, sometimes the smallest steps lead to the biggest changes. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe and join us for more stories that prove compassion can change the world.